When I woke up, I discovered that my dead wife was suddenly alive again, while my living son had died. After falling asleep and waking up again, I found my son alive and my wife dead. I realized I could switch between these two worlds, and I discovered there were connections between them. But I still couldn't understand why this was happening. I found psychologists in each world, but I discovered they said almost identical things. This made it impossible for me to distinguish which world was real and which was false. Just when I was feeling lost, I received a case. A patient at a mental hospital had taken hostages using a bomb. When I arrived at the scene, I found the patient had completely lost control. I immediately called him to try to calm him down. He demanded I turn off the sirens. To help him stay calm, I did as he requested. Then he demanded I drop my weapon and enter the room to negotiate with him. After hearing his demands, I immediately went over. Once he confirmed through the surveillance cameras that I was alone, he opened the door. When I met this patient, he told me he wanted to see his sister. Hearing this request, I was shocked because I had read his file before coming to play. His sister had died a year ago, but he insisted his sister was still alive. At that moment, I realized this patient seemed to be like me. He also had two worlds in his mind, but since I hadn't figured out what was happening to myself, I couldn't convince him. I could only try to calm him down step by step. When he asked where his sister was now, I didn't want to lie to him and told him his sister had died a year ago. Hearing my words, he became agitated again and even knocked me unconscious. At that moment, I switched to the world where my son was alive. To investigate this case quickly, I decided to go see a psychologist and ask for a solution. Just then, I saw a penguin in my living room at home. This shocked me, but I didn't have time to think about it. I immediately rushed to the psychologist's office. The psychologist told me that the case I encountered was just a dream. Hearing this explanation, I still didn't know what to do. Just then, that penguin appeared again. I thought I was starting to have hallucinations like that patient. To solve the case quickly, I decided to go home and continue sleeping. After falling asleep, I returned to the crime scene. At this point, the psychologist from this world also came to the scene. He said he was there to help me calm the patient. Hearing this, I didn't suspect anything. To rescue these patients, I decided to negotiate with the patient again. Before negotiating, I deliberately pretended to call my colleagues and asked them to find the address of the patient's sister. Seeing that I was really giving these instructions to my colleagues, he let his guard down. When my colleague called back, he told me the patient's sister was dead and buried in a cemetery. Hearing this, I didn't dare let him know. I lied and said his sister was in a beautiful place, but that place had poor communication. However, his sister often wrote him letters, but since he had been in the hospital, he hadn't received them. As long as he came out, my colleagues would give him the letters. Hearing my words, he finally let his guard down and released the explosive device switch. He was eventually arrested. Later, to thank the psychologist, I specifically went to his clinic. But then the psychologist said he had never been to the scene. Hearing his words, I was completely confused.